I'm excited for today. We are going to jump into our message in just a minute, and before we do that, because we're going to take we're going to take communion at the end of service today, and I want to give you guys a chance, specifically those of you that are watching at home. I want to give you a chance to find juice and crackers or bread, or I believe that God is okay with some adjustments being made, and so maybe coffee and donuts or a bagel or whatever it is that you have that represents these two ideas. And at the end of service, we're going to be able to take communion together as a church, and I'm excited for that. So right now, what I want to do, before we hear a brief video from our senior pastor, is I want us to be able to take our tithes and offerings. We talk about this each week. It's an opportunity for us to be able to respond to the way that God has provided for our needs by giving a portion of that back. And we give a portion of that back to God, and we do that through the church. There's a number of ways to give online, on the website. I do want to just especially kind of talk about the Church Center app. If you guys don't have that on your smartphone, I would encourage you to get it. It's not only a great way to be able to manage your giving, but actually there's events that you can sign up for through that for our church. All of our small groups will be listed in that Church Center app. And so if you don't have that app, I would encourage you to download it. And then also, if you prefer to give physically, there's an offering box in the back at the Connect table. You can give that way. But when we give, it's a way for us to continue this practice of reminding ourselves that of a number of different things, really, but God is our priority and our provider first. But then beyond that, it's a way to remind ourselves that generosity and open-handedness is the best way to live and to navigate life. And everything around us tells us that that is not true, and we should be closed-fisted and try and hold on as tightly as we can to everything we have. But God continues to invite us to live generous and open-handed lives. And so this is one of the ways we get to do that. So I'm going to pray for our offering, and then we'll hear a brief video from our senior pastor. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for the way you do meet each of our needs. I pray that we would become increasingly aware of that in our lives, both in big and in small ways, not just in the way that we get a paycheck, but the way that we find community, the goodness that we get to celebrate on a day like today with child dedications, the hope that we find, the beauty of the area that we live in. God, you continue to provide so much goodness in our lives, and I pray we would wake up to that more and more each day. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Let's watch this video together.
At South Hills, we believe life change happens better in circles than in rows. We were made to live lives of connection with God and with others. We are better, smarter, healthier, happier, and more fulfilled together. If your only experience of church is to sit in a row in a service, you'll hear great sermons and great songs, but you won't tap into the biggest benefit we have to offer: real relationships with other imperfect people just like you. It's when we step out of the rows we are in and circle up our lives with others that real growth occurs. That's why groups are so important to us. We want to see everyone at South Hills find a place to connect relationally and grow spiritually. We know that looks different for each person, and so we make it a point to offer a variety of groups. Our next group season kicks off in March, so now is a perfect time to get signed up. Visit southhills.org, select your campus, and sign up for a group online, or stop by the Connect area after service, and someone from the team will be happy to help you find the right group for you.
All right, so make sure you guys sign up for groups. We'll be talking more about that. I'm excited that Janine is leading a puppy group. So you guys heard it from stage. It must be happening. So now we got to hold her to it. But there's a number of different groups that are launching, and it's always a really important opportunity for people to take that step. We're talking about time today, a little bit of how to make friends, how to cultivate friendships, and the time that it takes. And I know that it can seem a little bit silly to carve out time in an already busy life, but it's such an important, such a crucial step for us each to take. I love food, I love cooking, I love restaurants, I love trying new recipes, and it's always a fun thing for me. And one of my favorite things online is when people post pictures of what it was supposed to turn out looking like versus what it actually turned out looking like. I don't know if you guys have seen those. I brought a few for you to check out. So this is a little Stitch cake from Lilo and Stitch. It's pretty adorable. It kind of looks like an actual car. Oh my gosh. It's like a gremlin cake now. We got some adorable Halloween ghost brownie situations. Still spooky. We've got some minions. Everybody loves a minion. Oh my gosh. It really is unintelligible almost. If you didn't see the before picture, I bet none of us would be able to figure out what that is. SpongeBob, the most annoying cartoon in history. And wow. That's a problem, you guys. If I had made something that turned out that bad, I don't know that I would have taken a photograph of it. I don't need any evidence of that big of a failure in my life. But we all have these kind of moments, and I've had these moments cooking. There's been times I've actually had a picture of the recipe, and I've had the steps and the ingredients, and it still comes out looking nothing like what I wanted it to look like. It still comes out looking different than what I expected it to look like. And I think that the reality is that we have this in our friendships also. We have friendships in our lives, or maybe we want friendships in our lives, and there's a gap between kind of what we expect them to be like and the reality of how they are. There's a gap between what we want our friendships to look like and what we're actually experiencing from other people. We've all had this. A lot of times, we base this off of friendships that we see in movies, or a friendship in someone else's life that we know, or maybe even a past friendship that you have had, a close friend from your past, and you want to find a friend like that again. And we have this picture, but oftentimes there is a gap between what we want and what we hope for and what we long for and what we're actually experiencing. We're going to talk about that a little bit today because there's this challenge that we have. We want to have this immediate connection, this kind of spark. And we think about this sometimes in love and in romance. Like, I just want to fall head over heels. And I think we want that for friends also. We all want that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is my new best friend. This is perfect. But it doesn't usually happen that way. It usually takes a lot more time. There's a study the University of Kansas did. They found that it takes about 50 hours to go from an acquaintance to a casual friend, 40 more hours to become a real friend, and 200 hours total to become a close or a deep friend. And that's a lot of time. You read that, and I can see in most of your faces, you're already giving up. Like, well, I guess I don't need friends after all. Let me just figure it out on my own. It can be overwhelming, and it makes sense of why kids are so good at making friends, right? Because they have nothing but time. And then for us as adults, there's a sense of like, I'm not even sure I'm going to be alive for that many more hours. Like, I'm sliding into the final stages of life. Like, there is a sense of I don't have the capacity to pour into relationships with this much time, with this much energy. I have humans that rely on me for food and cleanliness. I've got jobs. I've got, other responsibilities. And there are so many challenges to developing healthy, deep friendships. There's not really a way to circumvent this. I don't have some sort of DIY hack to be able to get around this. I will say, and it feels like I have to say this because I'm a pastor, but I don't say anything because I have to. I hope you guys know I'm pretty honest with you guys. The one thing that has helped us cultivate friendships faster is being a part of a church. And I specifically saw that when we moved out of state, the only person that I knew was the person that hired me to work at the church, and our friendship was based solely on a paycheck. I didn't know anybody else there at the church, but as I moved to Des Moines, Iowa, we were in a room full of totally new people, and everybody in the community that we met, they're like, how have you guys built so many friends already? It's like, well, we just ended up in a group of people that wanted to build relationships. And I think in a lot of ways at its best, that's what the church is. It's a community of people like Pastor Moses was talking about that says, we are better together. There is something special about living our lives together, moving in the same direction, focusing on the same target that we're moving towards. There's a few major barriers that get in the way of building deep friendships for us these days. I think there's probably a lot of them, but the three that continue to come up over and over again as I've been preparing, the first one is technology. Technology has really kind of broken our ability to develop healthy friendships because we like to move fast, and technology supports that. A lot of us, we don't even want to have to go drive through to order our food. We make somebody else drive through Del Taco for us and deliver it to our door. And now we have the option where they don't even have to knock. They can just leave it outside. I don't even want to have to look at that person's face so they see the shame that I have for how many chicken tacos no, I'm just kidding. But there's a sense, with DoorDash, with Wi-Fi connections, we get frustrated that we can't stream in ultra high def on our phone because of the buffering of the internet or whatever it is, technology has kind of helped us, or I don't know if it's helped us. It has been helpful, but there's a challenge that comes with it because we're not used to waiting. For thousands of years, people had to wait. If you wanted to eat something, you had to wait for it to grow, or for it to, there was this ongoing aspect, and we kind of have this idea with friendships, with relationships, with developing closeness. It shows up in our spirituality a lot, that we want these things to happen immediately, and it takes time. The second one is busyness. Busyness is another challenge to our relationships. We seem to be busier than ever, but like we just saw in that study, deep friendships are developed over time. And I think a lot of us, probably mostly subconsciously, but maybe some of us intentionally, we say, you know what? I just don't have time for friendships. I'm too busy. I have too much going on. And so I'm going to figure out how to just live and sacrifice that desire. That's going to be the thing I give up. I'll continue working overtime. I won't carve out time to be able to do these other things. I won't be uncomfortable enough to meet some new friends. I'm gonna just go ahead and sacrifice this desire, this longing, or even this way that we are created to actually be our best selves in friendship because we're busy. And then the third one is past hurts. Past hurts from previous friendships, past hurts from family, past hurts from marriage, from relationships, any sort of relational pain, and whatever the definition of the relationship was, those past hurts can get in the way because when we are wounded, when we are hurt, when we feel we've been betrayed or let down or something like that, we put up these walls. I was just speaking with someone this past week. I do premarital with couples as they kind of get ready to step into marriage, and I was talking to this couple, and she was talking about how there is this huge wall, this like great wall of China-sized wall between her and this other person, not her spouse, don't worry, but between her and this other person. And she just said, I just don't know how to just let that wall down. It would be unsafe for me just to take that wall down. They hurt me really badly, and I feel like I have to be cautious. I can't just take that wall down. And I said, like, well, maybe you should build a smaller wall behind the big one, and then take the big one down. You don't have to go from 0 to 100. You don't have to just totally make yourself vulnerable and ready to be hurt by anybody that walks along. But maybe it's a step in the right direction of finding a sense of safety. And I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna try to trust. I'm gonna try to be vulnerable again. But these three things are issues. They're challenges for us in developing friendships. I think a lot of times, even those of us that have good friendships, what I have realized is that the people that I am closest with, I don't even always know why I am close with them. That sounded weird. I like them a lot. I don't know what it is that I've been doing that has brought us together and kept us in good relationship. I've stumbled into it. I've accidentally been this kind of person a lot of times. We don't always know what it takes to be a good friend. And as you look at past friendships or current friendships, how aware are you of the strengths and the weaknesses that you bring to that relationship? Ephesians 4, Paul is writing and he describes a few components of deep relationships, and he says it this way: be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Now, these are ideas, these words are probably ideas that you've heard before. You may have read this scripture. We've read this on Sundays before. Humility, gentleness, patience, peace, unity. These are common themes. There's nothing here that's like shocking. But I think that there's an aspect of us that's wondering what's happening next door. I was kidding. Those are the kids. You guys know the elementary kids hang out there, and they have more fun than anybody else on campus. So we're okay with it. But there's aspects of us that we kind of become numb to these words. We kind of end up in this place of like, yeah, it would be great if I was more gentle. I sure wish I was more humble. I think I'm pretty awesome, but whatever. Maybe not everybody does. I want to fight for unity. We have these ideas, but I don't know that many of us proactively pursue these things. And I think we might just be a little bit too familiar with these words. Are you the kind of friend that someone would want to have? Does this describe who you are? Because it's not going to help you to be this it's not going to help you to magically stumble into a friendship if you don't know how to keep a friend or to be a good friend, to develop a deeper friendship. We can't wait until a friend comes along for us to start being a good friend. These are character traits. These are aspects of who we are that we can begin to work on now. You can embody these things now. And there's a reality for us that we can have these things in our lives and not have friends. That's a possibility. Maybe we're too busy. Maybe we just moved to a new area or whatever it might be. We can be humble and gentle and patient and not have deep friends. But you cannot have deep friends without these things. I would say that if you have close, deep friendships, you may not necessarily articulate these as strengths of yours, but I would say that these probably exist in between you and those people that you're friends with. We talk about this idea in our Discover class because we long to have these friendships. And so we think to ourselves, once I find someone that's going to be a good friend, then I will be a good friend to them. But the reality is that all the things that we long for in our friendships, we're designed to give to other people. It's not just that we're waiting to get this from someone, but you were created, God created you to actually give these things to others as well. And so to wait until you have a good friend to be a good friend is a broken, backwards way of thinking about it. It's a broken, backwards way of looking at it. We need to start leaning into those things now. We all have this challenge where we think, we say, we feel, you know what? I'll forgive them when they forgive me. I'll be generous when they're generous to me. You know what? I'll do those things that they want me to do when they start doing some of the things that I want them to do. We kind of have this issue in our hearts and in our minds where we say, I will be that when they are that. When they show me, then I will. But none of these things are just like light switches that we can just flip and all of a sudden become humble, gentle, patient, loving. These are things we have to actually develop and lean into in our lives. I saw this play out yesterday. My 10-year-old and my 6-year-old, they have very different interests. Mason loves to read and Harry Potter and all kinds of introvert type of things. And Arlo loves to twerk and dance and just run around the house like a maniac. So very different interests. But every once in a while, they get on this same page where they want to play together. And as a parent, it's like the most heartwarming thing. I love it so much. And it takes about 2 minutes for them to start yelling and come in. And they're at this stage right now where they very frequently, Arlo will come in and say, I want to play with Mason, but he won't let me blank, so I'm not going to play with him. And then Mason will come. He's like, well, he's trying to, whatever the thing is. And it's this sense of, I refuse to do what I want to do because you won't do what I want you to do. And we have this kind of wrestling match with others. And it shows up in every aspect of our lives and different relationships. We're invited to begin being this type of person now, even if you don't have those deep friends. We're invited to continue pursuing those things now. Don't wait for a friendship to happen. Be the kind of friend that you want to have. Start that now. Ephesians 4 is true, but I wanted to try and put this into a different framework for us to think through. I wanted to use some different words that we could hold on to. So there's 4 things that make great friends. And as a pastor, I'm required at least once a month to have all of these things start with the same letter. And so this is my due diligence. 4 C's of making or keeping, maintaining good, deep friendships. These 4 things that we need to lean into. The first one is constancy. That's not a spelling error. I had about 4 people after first service be like, I don't think that's a word. Like, it is a word. I promise. Google it later. You'll find it. Constancy is the first one. Constancy is defined as the quality of being faithful and dependable. Faithful and dependable. Last week we looked at Proverbs 17 where it says, a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for a time of adversity. It echoes this idea of faithfulness and dependability. What types of times is all times? It's at all different kinds of times. It's easy to be a friend and to love someone when things are good and when they're nice, but a friend loves even when things are difficult. Even when there's tension, there's this constancy, this dependability. And then Proverbs 27 says, don't forsake your friend or a friend of your family. Do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes you. Better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. Again, it echoes this idea of relying and being consistent in the way you connect in your friendships, this constancy, good times and bad times. You cannot be a good friend without availability and initiation and consistency and dependability. You have to intentionally pursue people in your life so they recognize that they are loved, that you are there for them. I told some of this story in the past, but I can't think about this idea without remembering this experience. When my wife was pregnant with our first son, there was a lot of health issues. We were in the hospital for about 4 months during the pregnancy. We lived there, essentially. It was like they set up a little apartment for us in the hospital. And I was blown away because we knew we had friends, but I didn't know what kind of friends we had until that time. Until that season when we began to see people show up day after day after day. Sometimes they would bring us food. Sometimes they would come and play games. There was this one lady who would show up, and I was never there when she showed up. I don't know how she could tell when I was gone. And my wife is a bit of an introvert, so she was happy when I was gone also. And in those moments, this lady would show up, and her name is Cinda. And she is, just like a different style of person. And she would just show up and sit down next to Ez in the hospital room and just start quilting. And Ez would be like, she just doesn't leave. And there was like this weird battle between, I kind of want to be alone, but also this lady just continues to show up day after day after day. It's a crazy thing to look back on. We've got friends that showed up in this way. This constancy was a powerful thing at shaping our understanding of what deep friendship meant. It pursues intentionality on behalf of others. And it can be a difficult thing because our society, our culture is very kind of transient and mobile, where everything is kind of disposable at this point. It's just really easy to kind of move on to something easier when things are difficult. But we're invited to pursue this committed faithfulness in our friendships. The second word is carefulness. Carefulness. Another way to think of this idea of carefulness is by being full of care. It's a way that I always kind of process through this idea. It's being full of care, full of compassion. One of my favorite Proverbs, it's so funny to me, Proverbs 27, it says, if anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. And I think some of you guys need to memorize this verse because you're too happy at 8 a.m., okay? We just need a couple hours to get going. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it'll be taken as a curse. Proverbs 25 says, like one who takes away a garment, another translation says a blanket, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. And what that's articulating is someone who is not full of care. It's someone who is not aware of what another person is going through. This isn't necessarily always external. This isn't necessarily like, oh, their life is melting down, but it's actually about what's happening internally in their heart and in their mind. There's this idea of emotional intelligence, of being able to kind of understand. But it's not just being able to understand. It's actually deciding I want to intentionally understand. I'm going to ask. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to pursue a depth of relationship. One author said that an uncareful friend is one who does not know the inner topography of the heart. The inner topography of the heart, the inner shape. Where is the heart? What's happening inside someone's life? To be uncareful is to be oblivious to that. And now, obviously, we can't know everything about everyone, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we cultivate those 2 or 3 virtue friendships, those deep friendships in our lives. We can't be emotionally disconnected. We need to be full of care. Romans 12, Paul's writing, he says, be devoted to one another. And then he says, laugh with your happy friends and share tears when they are down. I was reading this week, and there's an author who was talking about parenting. I guess maybe when I do it, it's more like childing. I don't really know. They were talking about parenting, and they articulated this, which resonated true for me. They said, you're only ever as happy as your saddest child. You're only ever as happy as your saddest child. And what they're kind of illustrating is that there's almost like this tether to your saddest child. There's this emotional connection that you're connected to that child, whichever one. Maybe it rotates depending on the seasons, but there is this closeness that you can't escape from, this emotional connection. You are full of care for that person, and you are unable to disconnect and detach and go somewhere else because of that connection. And obviously, they're talking about parenting or childing, but I think it applies to friendships as well, those deep friendships. There's times that I've had friends going through things, and even when I'm not with them, I still ache for them. I still grieve for what they're going through. This is what it means to be full of care, to show up for another person, to respond to their needs, to give the gift of emotional connection. The third word is candor. Everybody say it with me. Candor. 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 It's a little weird. Proverbs 27, verse 5 through 6, I think describes this word well. It says, an open rebuke is better than hidden love. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. Candor is this idea of being truthful, but it's not about being a jerk. It's based in love. In John 1, he's describing Jesus, and it says he's perfect, full of truth and grace. A lot of us, we kind of lean one way or the other. We're very truthful and mean, or we're very graceful, and we have a really difficult time being honest and calling things as they are. Candor is this idea of being truthful to others. This idea of wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. There's a stark contrast. Wounds from a friend versus kisses from an enemy. There's this contrast that is pointing out about the importance of honesty in friendship. Oscar Wilde said it in the darkest way possible. He said, a true friend stabs you in the front. Yeah, it takes a second. Now, obviously, none of us want to, experience pain, but there is this connection that is crucial in our friendships. In church growing up, they would always call it accountability. But it's really this candor, this ability to say, I love you, and because I love you, I will share this with you. I will articulate. I'll help try and point out some challenges or a blind spot in your life. Sometimes the words your friend needs to hear are going to be difficult. But in love, we're able to articulate that to them. Sometimes the words that you need to hear, that I need to hear, are going to be difficult. There have been times in my life where I look back over a season and I say, I wish somebody had told me that I was missing it. I wish somebody had told me. A really common illustration of this is you want someone to tell you when you have food in your teeth. It's always a little bit discouraging to get to a mirror at the end of the day and be like, well, how long has that been going on? We want this in our friendships. We need this in our friendship. We need people that love us enough to have candor with us. It's not the freedom to be a jerk. It's the responsibility of a friend to be truthful. I had a conversation with some friends yesterday, and we were talking about some of the challenges that they're going through, and they just brought up, it's kind of a complicated situation, but essentially there's some people that they know that are making poor choices in their marriage. And they were asking, what do I do? How much do I say? I have a relationship with them. How much voice do I have to speak into these choices that they're making? They're essentially asking this question of, is candor the right thing in this scenario? It was a really difficult conversation to navigate through, but they were trying to understand how much should I be full of grace and close my eyes, which is the temptation from many of us, and how much should I lean into this truth piece and candor because I love them and have a hard conversation? It's a difficult thing. It's a really difficult thing. And it caused me to experience this fourth word that we're going to talk about, which is counsel. They're asking me these really heavy questions, and I was terrified to respond. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of responsibility. And I think that's where counsel, in my mind, is different than giving advice. We give advice to a lot of people. Let me know something you're dealing with, I'll give you some advice. Advice comes quick. There's cliches that we can use for advice. Advice is, I already kind of have an answer ready. But when you think about the idea of giving counsel to someone, you sense that I have a responsibility in this. They're asking me these really heavy, important, weighty questions. And it took me a minute to figure out how I wanted to respond because I felt that responsibility. I can't just give you an answer all willy-nilly. I have to think through what is the right way to respond in this scenario. Counsel is different than advice. Advice is primarily us speaking, but counsel is when we take time to listen, to pay attention. Proverbs 27 verse 9 says, "The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense." There's this beauty that comes from a friend who is willing to actually listen to you and is able to communicate with you. It's heartfelt. It's not disconnected, and I'm going to give you an answer regardless of what's actually happening, but it's this heartfelt sincerity based on what I have heard you say. A friend is someone who is transparent with you, and you are with them. In a friendship, it's not a one-sided counsel. Sometimes it's reassuring, sometimes it's challenging, but it's back and forth, and you have this together in this friendship. These are all things that we long for. These are all things that we want in friendships: constancy, carefulness, candor, and counsel. But as I said earlier, everything that we long for, we're also designed to give. And we can begin leaning into these things in the relationships that we have now. Maybe it's acquaintances. Maybe it's those entertainment friends. Maybe it's a utility friend. Maybe it's a family member or someone at work or whatever it is. We can begin to be these types of people now. It's not waiting till we have a great friend and then assuming these things are magically going to happen. These are things that we can do now. Last week, we kind of talked about this idea of maybe there's some friendships or acquaintances that you can identify that can become deeper friends, more virtue friendships, these deeply connected friendships. Try doing some of these things. Try being this type of person in those relationships and see what begins to happen. It's so important for us to be the kind of friend you long to have. This feels like something that you would say to a kid in like an after-school special, like the more you know type of moment. But it is so important for us to realize that this is true for us in whatever stage we're in, to be the type of friend that we long to have. Last week, we took inventory of the friendships we have. And if you missed last week, I want to encourage you to go back and watch it. I think it's a really important idea for us to understand. But we talked about this idea of entertainment friends, people that we hang out with because we have fun together, but they don't really know much about what's going on. There's utility friends, and this idea of there's a benefit to this relationship. It's another parent at the school that I can talk with at pickup, and so I'm not awkward and alone or whatever the scenario is. And then there's these virtue friendships, these deep, intimate friendships. And we talked about how do we take an inventory of some of the people in our life and understand what types of friendships we have. This week, today, I want to invite us together to take inventory of who we are as friends. This isn't looking at your friends and judging them on these qualities. I want us to look internally at who we are. You see these 4 words that we've talked about: constancy, carefulness, candor, and counsel. On each one of your seats, you have a piece of paper and you have pen. I would love for you guys to take that out. I want you to put some intentionality into this, and I want us to rate this. If you guys are watching online, I want you guys to do this as well. This is an important thing for us to be honest and have a little candor with ourselves about who we are in our relationships. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being failure. That's not too strong, right? 1 being really bad and 10 being really good. I want you to rate yourself on the way you show up in your friendships. Constancy. Am I present? Am I faithful? Do I show up in good and bad times? Have I sent that message when that person was struggling, even though I didn't know if I had the right words to say? Did I drop something off at their house, even if I didn't know if it was going to be the right thing or helpful or the perfect gift? It's that consistency of showing up, even when it feels like you're not totally sure what that means. How constant are you in those friendships, in those close friendships? The second one is carefulness. Are you full of care? The opposite of carefulness is, how are you today? Good. Oh, good. How are you? I'm good too. And then moving on. This is kind of just surface level. Are you actually asking? Are you leaning in? Are you trying to understand and kind of hear from someone's heart how they are doing? The third one is candor. This might be the easiest one to know how well we do on these areas. Might be the easiest one to have a clear grade. I think maybe the best question to ask yourself is, do you have difficult conversations or not? Are there things in your relationships or your friendships where you're like, man, I really wish that we could resolve this, but I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to talk about it. Are you able, with love and in grace, to be truthful with the people in your life, the closest people to you? And then the fourth one is counsel. Do I feel a responsibility in my relationships and the way I connect with my friends? Do I feel a weight of responsibility? Am I listening to understand and actually helping them grow and become more of who God intended for them to be? I want you to identify these areas, and maybe if there's 1 or 2 that stand out as something that you could really, it would be beneficial to pay some attention to and to learn, to grow in. I would encourage you to kind of mark or asterisk those areas that you really can pay some better attention to. It's important for us to be the kind of friend that we want to have. And I wonder if there's friendships that maybe we have lost, or maybe friendships that haven't grown to their full potential because we haven't been these things. We haven't been available. We haven't wanted to connect and care for others. Last Sunday, I referenced John 15, and Jesus is talking about friendship, and he says that there is no greater love than one who lays down his life for a friend. And then a couple verses later, he says, I now call you friends. And I don't know that the disciples were fully aware of what was about to happen, but he was essentially showing, I'm going to tell you what the truest, most clear form of love is, and then I'm going to do it. I'm going to express it to you. And in Matthew 26, at the Last Supper, Jesus is sitting around a table with the 12 people that were closest to him. Different levels of friends. There's about 3 people that Jesus was closest with. There was one person at the table who was going to betray him. There's all kinds of different friendships represented, and they're sharing a meal together. And it says in verse 26, while they were eating, Jesus took bread And when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." There's this symbolic representation of the meaning of the bread and the wine, the cracker and the juice, the coffee and the bagel, whatever it is that we have. It is this beautiful symbol. It's this beautiful reminder that when Jesus says, "This is my body broken for you," it's a reminder of his choice to lay his life down for us, his friends. This truest form of love. We're reminded of that in this moment. And he instructs us to do this in remembrance of him. Do this act of communion to remember this love that he displayed. So I want to invite you, the bottom part of this cup, you can lift up, take this cracker out. I invite you to eat this. And as you do, contemplate the truest form of love that Christ showed you and I. Jesus takes the cup and he says, "This represents my blood, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins for many." He says, this is the blood of the covenant. And I think why that's important is because this covenant represents a new relationship, a new foundation to be able to stand on. We can't talk about friendship without understanding the friendship that we have with Christ. The covenant that Jesus started based on his shed blood is one based on his love for us, his constancy for us, the way he shows up in the high and the low, the way he's able to be honest and articulate with where we are at. This deep friendship that doesn't rise or fall based on our failures or our goodness, but it's solely based on the forgiving power of the love of God. So as we drink this juice together, I want to invite you to contemplate that.